Life is just a series of peaks and troughs, and you don't know whether you're in a trough until you're climbing out, or on a peak until you're coming down. I don't know whether that actually applies here or not, but let's talk about the Confederations Cup anyway. At its heart, the Confederations Cup was a whimsical tournament of idealism. It's almost childlike in its invention. The idea being that all the winners of all the international tournaments come together to see who's the bestest of them all. But did that make it a good tournament? Did it make it a worthy tournament? This video seeks to analyse the Confederations Cup in its entirety, delving back through the archives of all 10 iterations of the tournament, from its earliest bizarre days of Saudi involvement to the latest one in 2017 Moscow, exploring its successes, pitfalls and everything in between to determine whether it was rightfully killed off or whether it deserves another chance. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the absurdity of the Confederations Cup. Now this story begins in Saudi Arabia for the first ever edition of the Confederations Cup, but at this time it wasn't yet called that. Instead it was called the King Fahd Cup, named after, surprise surprise, King Fahd of Saudi Arabia. In fact, at this time the tournament wasn't even under the auspices of FIFA whatsoever. Instead, His Royal Highness just had the idea to bring over all the champions of different continents into this knockout tournament taking place in the King Fahd Stadium. That's right, if you thought that Saudi Arabian influence was a new thing, think again. This guy decided to name a tournament after himself and then play it in a stadium named after himself. The first iteration began with just 4 teams. Saudi Arabia as hosts, Argentina as South American champions, the Ivory Coast as African champions, and the United States as North American champions. Yes, no European or Oceanian representation in the first tournament. Clearly King Fahd was not a fan of the underdogs Denmark, who'd won the 1992 European Championships. Nonetheless, the opening match of the tournament saw Saudi Arabia take on the United States in the first of 2 semi-finals. The visitors had far greater pedigree on the international stage, with the United States already having appeared at 4 World Cups, with Saudi Arabia yet to ever qualify for one. Despite this, home crowd advantage clearly played a pivotal role, as Saudi Arabia ran away with the game by 3-0. 75,000 spectators flocked to the King Fahd Stadium to watch the opening match of the tournament as they saw their country prevail. Elsewhere, Argentina would dominate Ivory Coast by 4-0, with Batistuta picking up a brace. The US would recover in the 3rd place playoff by beating the Ivory Coast 5-2. And in the final, in front of another capacity crowd, Saudi Arabia were unable to stop the dominance of Argentina, with Diego Simeone picking up the 3rd and final goal. But the main point to take away here is that the tournament was a major success. The stars enjoyed the change of pace too, playing in something that was more than a friendly, but less tense than, say, a World Cup. And commercially, a sellout stadium in a nation not known for their footballing ability had to be commended. So it was unsurprising when Saudi Arabia decided to run it back in 1995. That's right, back it came again, this time with 6 teams instead of 4 and being played in January, not October. Saudi Arabia returned as hosts, with the winners of all 5 major confederations with their latest champion, namely Denmark for Europe, Japan for Asia, Argentina once more for South America, Mexico for North America, and Nigeria from Africa. With more teams, saw the addition of a group stage with 2 groups of 3. Denmark, Mexico and Saudi Arabia in Group A, and Argentina, Japan and Nigeria in Group B. The winners of each group would meet in the final, with the 2nd place teams playing in the 3rd place playoff. As the tournament began, it was clear that the crowds weren't as big as they were in 1992, but were far from being empty either. Though on the international front, things had improved, as the tournament was now being broadcast on Eurosport in the West. And more importantly still, once again, the product was extremely entertaining. The tournament saw the likes of Luis Garcia of Mexico shine, Batistuta appeared again, the Laudrup brothers, oh and who can forget Kazuyoshi Miura, you know, the 56-year-old footballer still playing today. But none were as impressive as the masterful JJ Okocha, who was at his magical best during the King Fahd Cup. Denmark would end up preventing Argentina from making it back-to-back titles, with Mexico winning in the third place playoff against Nigeria. The tournament once again had proven a hit with fans and players alike. FIFA had seen enough. They loved the concept and decided to take it under its jurisdiction going forward and rebranding it to the Confederations Cup. It would be held every 2 years with 8 teams now instead of 6 moving forwards. 1997 rolled around, and so did the return of the newly named Confederations Cup. As it was now part of FIFA's international calendar, this helps overcome one of the major obstacles to the tournament, which was getting clubs to release their players for the international. Now it was under FIFA, they had to. Saudi Arabia were back as hosts once again, which was one of the conditions to allowing FIFA to take over the tournament, with Brazil, Uruguay, Mexico, South Africa, the Czech Republic, Australia and the United Arab Emirates joining them for the 3rd edition. The tournament once again proved to be a great spectacle, with many entertaining matches littered throughout the competition. Uruguay and South Africa played out a thrilling 4-3 to the South Americans. The Czech Republic decimated the UAE by 6-1, with fan favourites Nedved and Smica running the Middle Eastern nation ragged. But the match of the tournament had to be between Brazil and Australia. A double hat-trick from Ronaldo and Romario in a 6-0 demolition gave the fans exactly what they wanted. Denilson finished as player of the tournament, and it was on this basis that many people thought that the 1998 World Cup was destined to be won by Brazil. However, that didn't come to pass. Back to it again though, once again the tournament had proven to be a great hit. Now under the auspices of FIFA, the expansion of the tournament had proved to be fruitful and underlined its importance within the footballing calendar, with the big nations calling up their star names. It would now be on FIFA to make this tournament a success outside of Saudi Arabia, with it moving around the globe going forwards. And the choice for host in 1999? Mexico, with its 115,000 seater capacity, Estadio Azteca taking centre stage. And soon enough, it was Confed time again. The 1998 World Cup had come and gone, with France winning on that occasion, but they had declined to take place in the 1999 Confederations Cup. Instead, Brazil returned, hoping to retain their crown. The big question going into the tournament though was, could the excitement factor remain outside of Saudi Arabia? The answer was a big fat yes. Goals were aplenty once more. In the group stage, Saudi Arabia, who were appearing due to winning the 1996 Asian Cup, managed to both win 5-1 versus Egypt and lose 5-1 to Mexico. Elsewhere, Brazil trounced Germany by 4-0 in the groups, and then smashed Saudi Arabia in the semi-finals 8-2, with a very young Ronaldinho scoring a hat-trick. But once again, it was the final that lit up the competition. The host Mexico versus Brazil in front of 110,000 people. A barnstormer of a match played out, with the North Americans defeating the South Americans by 4-3. The Confederations Cup had delivered again. It was just fun. Players could express themselves far more than under the confines of stressful World Cup matches. Once again, the greats had shown up, with Ronaldinho being the pick of the bunch this time, with 6 goals in the tournament. Going into the next millennium though, FIFA had another bright idea. Why not use the next tournament, the 2001 Confederations Cup, as a dress rehearsal of sorts for the 2002 World Cup, with South Korea and Japan being the hosts? That's duly what they did. 2001 came next, and the first chance for South Korea and Japan to test their readiness. An opportunity to check the logistical operations of hosting a big tournament and making sure the stadiums were up for hosting big crowds. For the first time though, Saudi Arabia were forced to watch from home, as there were already 2 Asian nations in the competition. Elsewhere, Brazil returned and France debuted for the first time. As for the hosts, South Korea were knocked out in the group stage, having lost their opening match to France 5-0. Japan, on the other hand, won their group ahead of Brazil, who were not at their potent best, only scoring 2 goals in the group stage. This failure to win the group saw France and Brazil meet in the semis, with Robert Pires at his very best, sending his nation through to the final. This set up a final with the host Japan, where Europe prevailed over Asia this time around. In terms of South Korea and Japan's performance as hosts, it had to be seen as successful. Attendances were high, stadiums were fantastic, and the logistics seemed to work perfectly. But a previous fear regarding the Confederations Cup did come true in 2001, and that was that both France and Brazil didn't bring all of their big names. In fact, France purely brought their B team, no Thierry Henry, no Zidane, no Makelele, none of them. Over on Brazil, they didn't call up either Ronaldo or Ronaldinho. It was up to FIFA to schedule this tournament in a way that would allow the best players to take part in the tournament. Could they make up for that in 2003? The 2003 Confederations Cup came next to France, the first time the tournament had been hosted in Europe. Taking place after the 2002 World Cup in South Korea and Japan, that had been a major success for FIFA. This iteration would be the last to take place every 2 years, as the tournament would then move forward to a quadrennial event. It would also be the last time that a non-World Cup hosting nation would host the tournament, with instead the tournament now just being used as a dress rehearsal for the World Cup going forwards. As for teams this time around, FIFA had another problem. Firstly, it was offered to Euro 2000 runners-up Italy, who declined. Then it was offered to 2002 World Cup runners-up Germany, who also declined. And then to Spain, who were second in the FIFA World Rankings, but they also declined. In the end though, it fell to Turkey, who had finished third at the 2002 World Cup. This Confederations Cup certainly had great moments again. Thierry Henry was at his goal-scoring bench, and Cameroon were the surprise package, making it all the way through to the final. But sadly, the tournament was overshadowed by the death of Marc-Vivien Foé. The midfielder had collapsed in the centre circle during the semi-final versus Colombia, and despite attempts to revive him, he died shortly after arriving at the stadium's medical centre. After the conclusion of the final, players held up a large portrait of Foé, and a runners-up medal was hung around it. Marcel Desailly of France and Rigobert Song of Cameroon held the Confederations Cup in unison with one another. Posthumously, Marc-Vivien Foé was voted third in player of the tournament, winning the bronze ball. The season before he died, he had scored 9 goals in 35 Premier League games for Manchester City. He had been capped 62 times by the time he died at 28. He will forever be remembered by all associated with the footballing community. The 2005 Confederations Cup saw a return as the tournament being used as a precursor to the following year's World Cup, this time being held in Germany. By this point, the competition was now always played in June, with the previous winter iterations no longer considered. Brazil were back for their 5th straight tournament, along with Mexico, with Tunisia and Greece debuting for the first time. Again, the mainstay of every tournament so far had been excitement, and this continued here. Germany 4, Australia 3. Argentina 4, Australia 2. Germany 4, Mexico 3. It was just raining goals. And the final once again did not disappoint. Brazil smashed their rivals Argentina 4-1, with Adriano being the player of the tournament. FIFA always feared that players and coaches may not take this tournament seriously enough, but it was that light-hearted vibe that gave this tournament the unique brilliance that it had. – 2009 would be next, and the first time the tournament had reached Africa. Brazil had qualified yet again alongside debutants Spain, Italy, Iraq and host Saudi Arabia. Both Spain and Brazil blitzed their way through their respective groups, whereas Italy were a surprise failure, maybe a sign of things to come at the 2010 World Cup. But it was the United States who ended up being the surprise nation of the tournament. They made it all the way through to the final, beating Spain in the semis, and in the final itself they were 2-0 up on Brazil, only for the South American giants to turn it around and win 3-2. Kaká was this tournament's golden ball winner, with Luis Fabiano finishing as top scorer. penultimate tournament would take place in 2013 Brazil. I have really fond memories of this tournament. I remember staying up late to watch it. Goals were yet again easy to come by, with this tournament averaging 4.25 goals per match. There isn't a nation that misses this tournament more than Brazil, who won their 4th crown here. They beat Spain by 3-0 and perhaps showed the downfall of Spain that was coming. But the winners of everyone's hearts was Tahiti, who conceded 24 goals in 3 matches, including a 10-0 defeat to Spain. The competition was at its very best here, with goals flowing constantly. Neymar and Iniesta ended up being the 2 best players of this tournament. Did, however, give Brazil unbridled expectation for them to win the 2014 World Cup, which again, they wasn't able to do. In 2017, the 10th and final Confederations Cup took place in Russia. However, this time around, there was a far smaller fanfare. Perhaps it's because there wasn't Brazil or Argentina, who had been at every tournament previous. Maybe it was because it was in Russia. Maybe it just didn't work out there. Or maybe by this point, people were just fatigued by the idea. Germany would end up winning the crown by beating Chile 1-0 in the final, a drab way to end what had been a very entertaining tournament series. It wasn't until 2019 though, which was when we learned the fate of the Confederations Cup. With FIFA having to move heaven and earth to get the World Cup to work in Qatar, they could not also expect clubs to open up a winter period for a Confederations Cup to take place in too. However, it seems that FIFA were happy to let it go anyway, with them instead choosing to expand the Club World Cup format into a 32-team quadrennial event, with the first one taking place in the United States in 2025 as its dress rehearsal to the 2026 World Cup. Plans for this though have been highly ridiculed, and it remains to be seen whether it will still take place in the current format. I won't get too much into the discourse surrounding the Club World Cup expansion, although I will say most of the opposition does come from Europe, who already has a very packed schedule. However, for clubs outside of Europe, the tournament is seen as very prestigious and a great way to earn a lot of revenue. So make up your own minds regardless. Rightly or wrongly, for now, the Confederations Cup has been consigned to history. There's no doubting that the tournament was a little quirky, a little bit strange, but it had a lot of heart too. During its run, it averaged 3.1 goals per match, which is higher than the 2.5 we usually see at World Cups. It lacks the seriousness, the tension, but instead it delivers a light-hearted, open factor, something that you don't often see in football. That isn't to say it didn't have its drawbacks too. Scheduling for the tournament had always proven tricky, with plenty of clubs not wanting to release their players for risk of injury, and the arguments will always arise for less international matches to take place. So that's what happened to the Confederations Cup. The oddball of an international tournament, which when it finally seemed to have some stability in the international calendar, got canned by the newest idea by a FIFA exec. Be that for the betterment or the detriment of football, that is for you to decide in the comments. But if that's all she wrote on the competition, then I must give thanks to the Confederations Cup for the good times, for the bad times, and for the plenty of weird moments along the way. And lastly, God bless Tahiti. I'll see you for the next one. Thank you for watching.